Arweave is a global permanent hard drive that allows developers and users to store documents and applications forever. Like blockchains have created a new paradigm in introducing distributed ledgers and distributed state machines, Arweave introduces another new paradigm in that we can store larger files like images, videos, PDFs, and other documents forever by only paying a single transaction fee. In the past, we might have used something like IPFS or Filecoin, which are also great Web3 technologies that enable file storage, but the main difference is that with IPFS, the data is not guaranteed. You have to use a pinning service or a protocol like Filecoin to ensure the data availability. The challenge in using Arweave in the past was that you needed the native Arweave token in order to transact on the network. This token is not easily accessible in certain parts of the world. This is where Bundlr comes into play. Bundlr is a protocol built on top of Arweave that allows users and developers to transact on the Arweave network more quickly and with the tokens that they probably already have in their wallet, with tokens being supported like Arbitrum, Matic, Solana, and over a dozen other chains. Bundlr can also be cheaper when saving data smaller than around 200 kilobytes. This is because when saving data to Arweave, you pay for chunks. Each chunk is around 256 kilobyte, regardless of how much you save. So if you only save 1 byte, you pay for the entire chunk. Bundlr bundles transactions together and posts them to the Bundlr network, which is comprised of nodes known as bundlers, which are used to bundle multiple layer 2 transactions into a single Arweave layer 1 transaction. To me, this is something very similar to some type of Ethereum rollup. So instead of paying for the entire chunk, you're only paying for closer to the amount of storage that you're actually using. Since its release, Bundlr has seen a lot of adoption and is now responsible for between 90 to 98% of all data uploaded to Arweave. Now that we know about Arweave and Bundlr, let's use them to build an app. The app that we're going to be building allows users to fund their Bundlr wallet using a cryptocurrency like Matic, then allows them to use their Bundlr wallet to save and view files to the network. By the end of this tutorial, you should have a good idea of how to use Arweave and Bundlr in your app to enable permanent file storage. With that being said, let's write some code. We'll get started by creating a new Next.js application. We'll change into the new directory and we'll install our dependencies using either npm or yarn. So the 3 dependencies that we're going to need are going to be bundlr-network/client, big number.js, as well as ethers. And once those are installed, we can go ahead and start actually writing a little bit of code. So to do that, I'll go ahead and open up this project in my text editor. All right, so the first thing that we might want to do is to basically initialize a new instance of Bundlr, which basically means that we need to kind of like sign a transaction that allows us to interact with the network. And then from there, we can add additional features. So to kind of get started with that, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and go into pages/_app.js, and we'll create a function here called initialize. And then instead of just returning the components, we'll maybe return a div with just a button that will allow us to call this function. And we still have a lot of work to do here, obviously, but this will be a good start. So to kind of go ahead and test this out, I'll just go ahead and run the server npm run dev, and we'll go ahead and open this up on localhost 3000, or in my case 3001. And there we see we have this initialize button here, top right or top left corner, and we have our Next.js application running. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and import a couple of things. The things that we're going to need to kind of initialize and interact with and create a Bundlr instance. So just like if we were working with a typical Ethereum application, or I would say crypto application, where we're looking for the Ethereum object or one of the other networks in the window, we can call await window.ethereum.enable, and this will allow the user to go ahead and connect their wallet. And then what we're going to do at that point is we want to import providers and utils from ethers. And we're going to use the provider here, providers.web3 provider, passing in window.ethereum, and then wait for that to initialize. And from there, we can now start interacting with Bundlr. So to do so, we're going to import the web bundler from Bundlr network/client. Now, there's a couple of different ways that you can interact with Bundlr, either on the server or on the client. Web Bundlr allows you to do so from the client. So that's what we're going to be working with. Now that we have that initial or imported, we can call new Web3 Bundlr, passing in the node that we'd like to connect to. So node 1 or node 2, I believe, are the two options. We can choose the token that we'd like to interact with Bundlr with. Like I mentioned before, there are a little over a dozen right now that you can use. So Solana, Arbitrum, Ethereum, or whatever. So you might dynamically allow the user to maybe choose this. But for now, we're just hard coding in Matic, and then we pass in the provider. And then from there, we call await bundler.ready. And then when this happens, this will allow the user to kind of sign or approve the transaction that allows the connection to happen. And then from there, we are kind of ready to go, really, I would say. So we might go ahead and save this and just try to click the button and see what happens. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh. Then I'll click initialize. Here I can choose the wallet that I'd like to interact with. Sign the transaction, and now we've been connected. So we have Bundlr connected, and we can kind of continue moving on. So what we basically might want to do at this point is, when you think of how we're going to be interacting with Bundlr, we're going to basically be transacting through Bundlr as opposed to transacting through the Arweave network directly. And in order to do that, we need to have some type of tokens that are moved over into Bundlr. So that means we kind of need to fund that wallet. And what we might want to do to kind of start facilitating that is kind of being able to query and find out what the current balance of the Bundlr balance is for this wallet address. So we might create a function called fetch balance that allows us to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'll create a function here called fetch balance. And what we need to do is we need to get a reference to this Bundlr instance and be able to kind of reference it. And in order to do that, we can either set the state and then call this separately, or we can use something like useRef, which allows us to call the function directly from this initialize function without having to wait for the state to update. So that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and import use state and use ref from React. And then in fetch balance, we can start doing some work. So here we want to go ahead and maybe create some state that we can hold this Bundlr instance. So I might say const Bundlr instance and set Bundlr instance is equal to use state, and then leave that as essentially null. And then here we can call set Bundlr instance, passing in Bundlr. So now we can kind of reference that there. But this isn't going to work if we want to initialize or call this function right here, that's kind of what we want to do. So what we need to do is use ref to kind of do that. So what I'm going to do is create a reference called Bundlr ref. And I can do that right here. I can say const Bundlr ref is equal to use ref. And then I can set the current value of Bundlr ref to Bundlr here. And what this will allow us to do is reference Bundlr ref here and call it. So what I'll do down here is I'll say we want to call Bundlr .current.getLoadedBalance, and this is going to be referencing, the Bundlr ref. So that's kind of how we're going to get that. And we're also then just going to log out the balance. And we want to format that using the utils.format ether, because this is going to come back as like an 18 character decimal or 18 decimal value. And then we're going to also maybe store this value in the state. So in order to do that, we might go ahead and say under this, we'll create another piece of state called like balance and set balance. And then here we can call set balance, and we can do the same thing where we call like utils.format ether, passing that in. And then if we want to do something like pretty naive and just maybe display this, we can say something like, okay, if there is a balance, then we'll just like display that. And I think like, of course, starting off, this is going to be 0 unless this wallet has something in it, which I don't think it does. So we'll log out the balance, and then we'll also display that. And maybe I'll say like balance. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and try this out. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to open my console, and I will click initialize. Boom, we have our balance. Our balance is set to 0. So the next thing we want to do is have a way to fund our wallet. So to do that, we're going to do some work, but it's not going to be in this app.js. Instead, we're going to probably do it in this index.js. So in order to interact with index.js, we're going to need to in order to interact with Bundlr in index.js, we're going to need a reference to some of these values and these functions that we've defined here at the top level at app.js. So what we want to do is essentially have some type of, I would say, context or some type of way to pass state around. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and create a new file called context.js at the root of our project. So I'm going to go ahead and import from React. What we want to do is import the create context. And then what I want to do is just export const, like main context or whatever you want to call this context is equal like use context or create context. And then here we're just going to like set that value to nothing. And then what we can do here in app.js is I will go ahead and minimize a couple of these functions for now. I want to go ahead and import main context from context. And instead of just like returning this div here, what we want to do is we want to go ahead and return main context.provider. And we want to wrap the main component. And then from within the component or any pages, we can then extract the values that we set here. So we can say the value, and we'll set this to like an object. And for this object, we might want to go ahead and pass down some of these functions. So initialize Bundlr, or initialize fetch balance. We might also pass down the balance. And we might also pass down the Bundlr instance. And then instead of showing the balance here, we'll probably just move that to the next component, which will be the index.js. So I think that we have everything ready to go here. So I'm just going to refresh and make sure that nothing's broken. Initialize still works. Okay, cool. And I'll probably actually delete this initialize function because we don't really need that here. We're going to probably use something like that in the next page. All right, so in index.js, we need to do quite a bit of work. So the first thing we might want to do is, let's go ahead and open index.js. I guess the first thing that we want to do is go ahead and extract all of the context that we have available, and maybe even, I guess, clean up some of this code that we're probably not going to use. So what I'll do is delete all of this code actually, and instead of having a class name of styles.container, we'll set our own style. And then I'll delete all of these styles. So we're kind of like starting, I guess, from scratch. So I'll say style equals styles.container, or actually let's not do that. Let's do container style. And here we can go ahead and set something like padding. And then maybe in our main app.js, we'll also set some like main I would say, styling around the entire application as well. Here we're going to do like a width. We just want to create like a 900 pixel wide container and then center it. And then I might add some padding. Nothing too fancy, just to kind of, give us a slightly better visualization than just have everything, floating all the way to the left. So we have that basic container. Here we're doing a top and bottom padding of 100 pixels and a left and right padding of 20 pixels. All right, so what we want to start off with is I think that we want to go ahead and make sure that we have the context that we want to kind of like extract here. So I'll go ahead and import main context and use context from React and from context, and then I can say const context is equal to use context, passing in the main context. And then this context object will hold all of the different values. So we might even go a step further and like say, what are the values that we pass in? So we pass in initialize, fetch, balance. We have these 4 values here. We might just say, let's destructure those here. So we want to, pull out the initialize function, the fetch balance function, the bundler instance. So we're good there. And then also we might go ahead and import big number JS because we're going to need that in just a moment as well. And I think that's the only imports that we're going to really need. So what we want to do now is we want to display the balance, allow someone to fund their wallet and increase that balance. We also want to allow someone to upload a file to the network and then be able to view that file, like a link to that file, I guess you could say. So we will go ahead and create some state. So for us to like store the file, we'll have a file and set file state. We'll also have an image and a set image. That's because the file itself is going to be formatted differently for us to upload it than it is going to be for us to display it locally. So when someone uploads a file, we want to kind of reformat that so someone can view it in the UI and they make sure that they know the file that they're uploading is the one that they like to. We also might go ahead and create like a URI. The URI will be, once the file is uploaded, we want to give them a link to kind of like view that on the Arweave network. And then we want to have an amount. And this will allow the user to kind of set the amount that they would like to fund their wallet with. All right, so we have all of our state. We have all of our, context, I guess you could say here. And we might have a function that we want to call that will initialize Bundlr again. And this will just call that initialize function that we have here. And we're kind of like somewhat back to where we were not too long ago. So with that being said, we might go ahead and I guess have a button that will allow us to initialize Bundlr. And what I might say is, like, if there is no balance set, then we'll go ahead and show that button. Because once the balance is set, we want to hide the button, really. Okay, cool. So we have some stuff going on here. Let's go ahead and try this out and see if we broke anything. All right, so we have our initialize bundler button there, and we'll click it, and we'll sign the transaction, and it looks like we have everything working properly. The balance has been logged out, and the button is hidden, and then if we refresh, the button comes back. So that looks good. So the next thing we might want to do is we'll have another condition that says, like, if there is a balance, we want to show some other UI. So we'll have like a div, and we might want to go ahead and just like show the balance. So let's have like an H3 there where we have the balance shown. We might also want to have like a form where we allow the user to go ahead and specify how much they would like to add to their balance. So what I'm going to basically do here is set some basic inline styling. Just to kind of separate this form. And what we'll have is like an input and a button. On the input, we want to essentially be able to call this set amount function here with the amount that they're going to type in. So I can say on change. And then for the placeholder, I'm just going to say amount to fund wallet, and then we're kind of like taking the event and we're setting the amount using the event.target.value, which is kind of what we want from the event. And I'll just break this up into a couple of lines to make it a little easier to read. All right, so we have that going on. What we need to also do is have like a button that allows the user, well, we already did the button, and I guess to like, fund wallet. And then here we'll have a function that will be called something like, I guess, fund wallet. And then here we'll go ahead and create this function. And this function will be what we kind of like use to take tokens from Matic and send them over to Bundlr. So what we might just check is to make sure that there is an amount. If there isn't, we'll just return. What we also need to do, though, is we need to parse the value into a conversion that is understood by Bundlr. And the way that we can do that is we can kind of use this little like line of code here where we're calling big number dot multiplied by the currency configuration and then dot base and then the second item in that array. If you want to learn more about how this works, check out the Bundlr docs. But for now, just understand that this is kind of a good way to take the current set currency, which is Matic, and kind of format it to be correct. Now we could call that directly here, but we also could say let's have like a function called like parse input. And then here we can kind of say, okay, we want to take this value that will be called here and what we'll basically, the reason we would split this up is like we want to make sure that we have a value that's acceptable, and we kind of check to see if it's less than 1. That means the value is too small, and if it's not less than 1, we return it. So that means that they will basically, not have anything returned if they don't put in the right amount. So after we have that amount, we can now call Bundlr instance.fund. So we can say await Bundlr instance.fund, passing in the parsed amount, and then we can call fetch balance again, because fetch balance is basically just going to like go and get their balance again and show it. So it should go up. And we might even log that out by saying console.log wallet funded with the response value. So for me to do this, I actually need to have some Matic in my wallet, and I need to be on the Matic network. So I'm on the Matic network. I don't have any Matic, so I'm going to go ahead and send myself some. All right, so once I've received my Matic, I should see that I have it there, 0.25. And I can go ahead and initialize Bundlr. And I'll go ahead and try to fund my wallet. So I'm going to fund it with like 0.1. If I click Fund Wallet, I should be prompted with a transaction confirmation. And then we're going to wait and see if our balance increases. All right, and once the balance has been updated in the network, it should show up here in your UI. So we now see we have a balance of 0.1. So if I refresh and I click Initialize Bundlr again, then I should see that my balance is there. So we've provided the user a way to kind of like fund their wallet. Next, we want to go ahead and enable the file upload. So to do that, I'm going to go back to the UI, and we're going to go ahead and create like another basic form. So we're going to have like, I guess below this div here, we'll have another input. With the type of file, and then we'll have a function called onFileChange that we'll create in just a moment. And then we'll have a button that says upload file, and then like on click will be upload file. So we need to go ahead and create those two functions. And I guess we also need the regular onFileChange function. Okay, cool. So the onFileChange function is going to be the first thing that we work with. So we're going to first check to make sure that there is a file. And if there is, then we'll continue. Because if someone like presses the button and then they cancel, then we don't want it to error out. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a reference to the image so we can view it in the UI by saying url.createObject URL, passing in the file. This will give us like a nice URI for us to be able to view it in the UI. And then I can call setImage, passing in the image. So setImage is just going to be what we defined up here. All right, so we've saved the image locally. What we now need to do is save the file locally. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to use file reader. So I can say let reader equal new file reader. And then we can call reader.onload. And what we're going to do is call set file buffer.from reader.result. And then we need to call reader.read as array buffer. And that will be called right here. So we have this essentially onload function, and then we trigger it by calling reader.read as array buffer, and then whenever we have a result, we're calling set file using the buffer that comes from that. So that is all we need to kind of set the file in the local state. And then we also need to kind of update, I guess, the upload file function to actually call Bundlr. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to call Bundlr instance.uploader.upload file. So here we're going to pass in the file as the first argument, and then some metadata around it as the second argument. We're setting the content type as an image, and you can also pass in other values there if you would like for querying from they have a GraphQL API that you can query from if you want to set other values. If you were interested in that, I would definitely check out the Arweave docs there because it's actually pretty cool. Also, check out my GitHub. I have a Twitter clone that's built using Arweave, and we utilize GraphQL for the query layer. And then what I'm going to call is set URI, and we're going to pass in http arweave.net/transaction.data.id. So this is going to be the hash from Arweave. So it's going to be some like random numbers and character and letters and stuff. And this is going to be like the unique identifier. We might even console.log the transaction as well. So we might say something like console.log transaction, and we can kind of view that. And I think that we're almost there. The only thing that we might want to do at this point is to, well, have we not used that image? Let's see here. Okay, I see what's going on. Okay, cool. So what we might want to do is, if we have the image after it's set here, we might want to show it in the UI. So I guess underneath the upload file, we might say, okay, image and image. And we'll just set the image as the image source, and we might just pass in some basic inline styles. So we'll just set the width as 500 pixels. And then the last thing we want to do is with that URI, we want to make that readable and also clickable. So we might say URI and we're going to pass in the URI there. So when the URI is set in the local state, it will show up as a link for us. So the image should show up when we upload it, and I think all of these variables have been used now, so we're good. All right, let's try this out. So I'm just going to refresh. I'll initialize Bundlr. Our wallet's already funded, so I'm going to now choose an image. A nice image from ETH Global. And I will go ahead and click Upload File. And here we're going to be transacting through the Matic network and Bundlr. And we see that we have a link. And if I open that up, then we see our file that's been permanently stored forever on the Arweave network. So that's it from this video. I just wanted to kind of give you an introductory overview of how to use Bundlr as a developer. We looked at how to use it on a client. Again, you can also use it on a server using a private key or a seed phrase. A lot of interesting Web3 applications are already leveraging both Bundlr and Arweave, including projects like Mirror.xyz, which is a Web3 blogging platform which uses Arweave, as well as Orbis, which is a crypto-native social media site similar to something like Twitter. All of the data is actually stored on the Ceramic network, but the user profiles information, I believe, and images and things like that are stored on Arweave. There's also Glass Protocol, which is something like a video NFT platform that allows users to monetize their videos in a different way than something like YouTube. If you'd like to learn more about Arweave itself, check out the wiki at rwiki.wiki, as well as the main docs at arweave.org. If you want to learn more about Bundlr Network, check out Bundlr.network. So that's it for this video. Thanks for checking it out. Be sure to like and subscribe, and keep an eye out for my next video.